come to questions, Secretary of State for Justice. Helen Morgan.
Number one, please, sir.
Justice Secretary.
Mr Speaker, the Government inherited an emergency in our criminal courts with a record and rising open caseload to nearly 80,000 criminal cases waiting to be heard in the Crown Court. In Shropshire, Shrewsbury Crown Court is currently sitting at a maximum capacity, including on additional court based at Telford Justice Centre. We have added an additional 15 sitting days to sit the fourth court at Telford Justice Centre.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. In my constituency of North Shropshire, residents have to travel to Shrewsbury to have their cases heard. As of last September, there was a backlog of over 730 open cases at Shrewsbury Crown Court, a 7% increase compared to 2024. The wider West Mercia area ranks 43rd out of 44 areas for the time it takes cases to get through the Crown Court, often taking more than 2 years to be heard. Does the Secretary of State agree with me with the Shrewsbury Crown Court's resident judge Anthony Lowe when he said that this is not a proper justice system, and can he outline what steps he'll be taking to improve the situation in West Mercia and Shropshire?
Justice Secretary.
Well, she is right, and that's why the Courts Minister visited Telford a few months ago. It is important just to say that Sir Brian has been absolutely clear in his report that we have to pull all levers if we are to seriously see this backlog come down by the next general election. That, of course, means investments and more sitting days, and she'll be pleased with the sitting days that we've invested in her area. It does mean modernisation and dealing with the efficiency problems that we inherited in the system, and Sir Brian will be publishing his report tomorrow, but it also means reform, and I would urge the Liberal Democrats to support us in our court reform.
Mr Speaker, and since the election, Telford and Shropshire Justice has seen a massive increase in capacity. First, by returning a magistrates' court back into use following years of that courtroom being closed because of a broken roof, and also news this week of the Nightingale Court becoming a permanent court, which is great. But in order to increase capacity, we also need to recruit and retain magistrates. To my great surprise, the Court Service are not recruiting currently for magistrates in my area. Will the Justice Secretary have a look at that and work with me to recruit, retain as many magistrates as possible to work in our justice system?
Mr Secretary.
Well, very much looking forward to working with my honourable friend. Pleased to see the recognition that the Nightingale Court will continue, because that is obviously very important. And good news, we are recruiting more magistrates across the system, and that will include in his area. We made that announcement just 2 weeks ago.
Anneliese Dodds.
Number two, please, Mr Speaker.
Well, with permission, Mr Speaker, I will answer questions 2 and 5 together. We are accelerating magistrate recruitment to meet future demand. Trailblazing reforms in 3 regions are streamlining the process, reducing the time from application to appointment and improving candidate experience. These reforms will shape a 2026 national rollout supported by the work with the judiciary to speed up onboarding and ensuring new magistrates sit sooner.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. After many years of Oxford Magistrates' Court being in a terrible state, I'm relieved that the leaks and other faults are finally now being repaired. It's obviously harder to recruit and retain magistrates if they're serving in unacceptable conditions, so I'm grateful this is getting sorted out, and I'm grateful for the measures that he announced around recruitment. Could he also let the House know, please, what he's doing around retention, because surely that's very important as well. Thank you.
The Secretary.
Well, she's right. There was historic underfunding, and sadly, it left our courts with a 1.3 billion maintenance backlog, which is why we increased the capital maintenance budget this year to ensure that we're dealing with the problems that we inherited in our courts. But she's right. Magistrates are key. They are the cornerstone of our lay system. 90% of criminal cases passing through the magistrates' court. We will be recruiting more, but streamlining the system, supporting magistrates with training is key also to retention, and we'll be investing in that area as well.
Barron.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Back in 2004, I became a magistrate, a position that I held for 20 years. When I first walked into the magistrates' retirement room, I thought everybody in there had retired. because I brought the average age down by about 30 years when I walked in. But what that says, though, Mr. Speaker, is it's a commitment to those who serve for years, but it also shows how hard it can be to get younger people involved. What is the department doing first to properly recognise and reward long-serving magistrates who keep the system going? And secondly, what's being done to bring in more young justices of the peace so that magistrates better reflect the communities that they serve?
Justice Secretary.
Well, can I congratulate honourable friend on his service as a magistrate? And he's right. We want to see people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all ages, feel able to serve in their local community and be a magistrate. He will be pleased to see that 41% of newly appointed magistrates last year were under 50, as opposed to getting towards pension age. There's more we can do. Some of it's around simplifying the procedures and actually people just understanding how to become a magistrate, because the complexity of the system previously was unbelievable and actually put people off applying.
And if you have local magistrates coach like Charlie would help as well. John Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I visited my local court just a few days ago. Now, in Horsham, we're actually lucky enough to have sufficient magistrates, but we still can't maximise throughput because of a lack of support staff. In July last year, the Justice Committee reported that shortages of support staff were having a significant impact on delays and court capacity. So can the Minister set out what the government is doing to attract younger people into the justice system as a whole so that we can finally get to grips with this horrible court backlog?
Justice Secretary.
The Honourable Gentleman, please know we are investing in more trainee legal advisors, 108 in the last announcement, but he's right, and there are issues, particularly in the South East, with support staff being able to compete with the sorts of salaries that they might get beyond the court system. This is something that we're looking at very closely.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his very positive answer. Minister, in relation to recruiting magistrates, it's welcome news and thank you for that. And the timescale has been set. I think the Minister referred to 70% of cases are looked after and by magistrates in the courts. That means that there's a lot of delays in relation to the victims. The victims who have waited ages and years for their cases to be held. Can the Minister give us an assurance new magistrates recruit more will mean that the backlog that is very clearly there for those victims will be addressed as well? It needs to be addressed. Victims need the answers.
Well, can I thank the Honourable Gentleman first off for raising victims. For too long in this place we tend to focus either on the perpetrators and the prosecution side, if you like, or the defendants. And it is important that we centre victims. That's why we're coming forward with more magistrates, because we do need to see that 90% dealt with more swiftly, of course. But actually the court reform package is what gets us the entire package. And I hope that the Honourable Gentleman will be able to support us in our court reforms over the coming months.
Sir John Hayes.
Question 3, Mr. Speaker. Yes.
Justice Secretary.
Well, with permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer questions 3, 13 and 19 together. Our focus, as I've said, is on victims being left to wait 3, 4, 5 years for their day in court. That's why I'll bring forward bold change to fix the rotting courts service that we inherited, record investment in our courts so they can sit for days, more days than ever before, modernisation to deal with inefficiencies we inherited, and reform to the system so that we can triage which trials get a jury and stop criminals gaming the system.
Sir John.
Speaker, as you know, the age-old jury system connects the public to the exercise of law and therefore is the heart of popular consent for criminal justice. So in abandoning this link, is it the government are careless of the accountability that brings, or is it they're driven wholly by thoughtless expediency? Are ministers careless or thoughtless?
Justice Secretary.
I've got to say to the Honourable Gentleman, we are not abandoning the jury system. But as Sir Brian Leveson said, in his Sunday Times article this weekend, the threshold needs to be rebalanced. I'm not sure if he was in Parliament in 1988, but when Margaret Thatcher rebalanced the threshold, moved criminal damage, moved driving a vehicle without authority towards the magistrates' court, I'm sure he didn't object to that.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's clear evidence up and down the country of Serco failing to serve the court service appropriately, and that includes for my constituents in Torbay. Does the Secretary of State accept that by driving a more impactful way of Serco, making sure that they're able to get people more rapidly to the courts, will give people better access to justice and allow people to have access to jury trials?
Very well linked to the end. Go on.
Well, the Courts Minister and the Prison Minister are working together on this. Sir Brian Leveson will have more to say in the part 2 of his report tomorrow on efficiencies. But, for example, local authorities opening bus lanes so that these drivers can speed through is one of the things that we're looking at.
Jonathan Brash.
Mr. Speaker, I recognise the Justice Secretary's sincere commitment to tackling the court backlog disgracefully left by Conservative and Reform politicians. However, one of the most troubling aspects of the proposals on jury trials is the suggestion that these changes would be permanent, regardless of whether the backlog persists. Will he therefore consider making these measures explicitly temporary and subject to review so that their impact, if any, on reducing the court backlog can be properly assessed?
Justice Secretary.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman, but can I also refer him to Sir Brian's report and Sir Brian's article in the Sunday Times this weekend, because he does talk about trials being longer. He talks about DNA evidence. He talks about more legislation that we are passing in this place. He talks about the police arresting more. And for all of those reasons, if we're serious about the backlog, if we're serious actually about getting to a system that was properly established so that you did not wait much longer than 6 months to a year for your trial to come forward, the changes that we're making have to be permanent.
Andy Slaughter, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot of focus on replacing juries with a single judge in some criminal trials. But the government's also intending to increase magistrate sentencing powers beyond what Sir Brian Leveson says to 18 or 24 months. So is it also the government's intention that district judges sitting alone will be able to sentence up to 24 months?
Justice Secretary.
Well, he knows, because we have discussed this, that we do need to increase the amount of district judges, but we are taking the power in the bill to increase the threshold for magistrates, and obviously how that coordinates with the new Swift bench will be essential once we get royal assent towards the end of this year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Sir Brian Leveson's review didn't contain any specific modelling to support his view that limiting jury trials would reduce the time taken for such trials by 20%. When the government undertakes its own modelling, if it doesn't support and validate Sir Brian's assessment, will it U-turn on the policy?
Justice Secretary.
Well, of course we support Brian's assessment of 20%. Sir Brian also relied on international comparator. It was one of the reasons why I was in Canada recently, where they thought 20% was an extremely conservative estimate, and it would be more likely to be 50%. But as he would expect, of course, we will be publishing our modelling alongside introduction of the bill.
Turner.
Mr. Speaker, as the Deputy Prime Minister speaks, 56 of the 516 Crown courtrooms are not sitting. That's because he and his department caps the sitting days for those courts. It is, in my view, a dereliction of duty to be planning to do away with some jury trials when courts are not sitting. the Institute for Government have said that Sir Brian's 20%, which was pulled from thin air, is more like 2%. What on earth is this government doing? Why don't we get a grip of what's really happening in the system?
Justice Secretary.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and he still is my honourable friend, who I know has a principal objection. But let me just say to him that it is important to recognise that Sir Brian has emphasised that we need to do all of it. We need to deal with the efficiencies, and we'll have more to say tomorrow, of course, when Sir Brian publishes, I think, part 2 of his report and looks at those issues of courtrooms and how you get prisoners and how the criminal justice system works as a whole. We are increasing the sitting days, more investment than ever before. I'm negotiating with the Lady Chief Justice. There will be more sitting days to come, but we also need reform and to ensure that we continue to support the jury system, which is what we're doing.
Nick Timothy, and welcome as Shadow Justice Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been reading the Labour Party manifesto, but without much luck. Can the Justice Secretary tell the House on which page appears the promise to restrict jury trials? Was it on the same page as digital IDs and all the tax rises?
Justice Secretary.
Well, can I first of all welcome the honourable member to his place and congratulate him on his recent promotion. And we will judge him, of course, on his record, and we note that he was responsible for cutting 20,000 police officers across the country. We note his hostile environment policy. He was the author of that, the Windrush tax, and, of course, that wonderful election-winning dementia tax. He will also note that our obligation, as was his obligation in government, was to ensure a fair trial. What we are bringing forward is a threshold change, very similar to the change that Margaret Thatcher brought forward in 1988.
Nick Timothy.
Not waving but drowning, Mr. Speaker. 40 of his colleagues, and the number is rising, say restricting jury trials is, quote, madness. He says he won't listen to them, or to judges, lawyers, or the victims of crime. So perhaps he will listen to these esteemed voices. Jury trials, this is a quote, will always be a cornerstone of British justice. That was the Courts Minister. There must be a right of trial by jury in all criminal cases. That was the Sentencing Minister. And trials without juries are a bad idea. You don't fix the backlog with trials perceived as unfair. That was the Justice Secretary himself. If even he knows this is a bad idea, how long must we wait for the 14th U-turn from this miserable government?
Justice Secretary.
It is a bit rich raising what my colleagues are up to on the back benches when his colleagues are actually going to other benches in this House. He knows that Article 40 of the Magna Carta makes clear that justice delayed is justice denied. And that's why it's our judgment and the judgment of Sir Brian Leveson that, for example, if you've shoplifted an iPhone, you should not be entitled to elect for a jury. That should be something that could be dealt with by a magistrate or a single judge.
Jess Brown for the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Justice Secretary is right to say that justice delayed is justice denied. But the Institute for Government's report into jury trials showed that the Justice Secretary's plans to erode jury trials will make very little difference to the court's backlog. So it's no surprise that there is wide-ranging opposition to the proposals from within the legal profession and across these benches. If the Deputy Prime Minister does decide to press ahead with these unpopular reforms, he stated it would not be retrospective, but the Courts Minister said it would be retrospective in the Justice Select Committee. Who is telling the truth?
Justice Secretary.
Let me just say to the Honourable Lady, the IFG said 10%. If this were 10% on waiting lists for a hospital in her constituency, she'd have it. They estimated a 10% contribution. Brian estimated a 20% contribution. I said we would bring forward the modelling. Of course, it is right that there is no substantive criminal liability change in the proposals that we're coming forward with. So in that sense, it's not retrospective. But in terms of caseload, then of course they will be subject to the new mode of trial once this bill gets royal assent.
Leicesterson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will be increasing funding for victim support services year on year from 2026 to 2029, recognising the need to meet that rising cost pressure of delivery and the need for long-term funding for our support services. In total, the MOJ will be investing over £550 million in victim support services over the next 3 years, the biggest ever investment in victim support services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for her commitment. Sefton Women and Children's Aid do a brilliant job advocating for victims of domestic abuse, but they have seen a worrying increase in the level of psychological abuse alongside historical challenges with violence. Can the Minister confirm that Sefton Women's and Children's Aid, along with other organisations doing such good work, will get the support that she has just outlined to enable them to look after the victims that they advocate for so brilliantly?
Can I commend him as a fantastic constituency MP and the brilliant work of Sefton Women and Children's Aid for all of the work they do in supporting victims of abuse and violence. He's right to highlight that victims are coming forward with much more complex needs now. It is not just physical violence, it is coercive and controlling behaviour, and it is right that that is properly treated and recognised. That is why we are ensuring that victims receive the right to timely support. That is a key part of the government's mission to halve the levels of violence against women and girls. We have committed to ring-fencing this funding that the MOJ provides to police and crime commissioners, and we are working with them to ensure that post their abolition, following their term coming to an end, that we can provide that certainty to victim support services so that they know that they are there whenever a victim or survivor needs them.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Supporting victims of heinous crimes such as child abuse is paramount, and aside from support services, clear communication and transparency is key. Yet the parents of the 21 babies abused by Roxana Lecker at Twickenham Green Nursery were given less than a week's notice that she would be deported to Poland this Thursday. They have been given no information about whether Lecker will continue to serve the rest of her 8-year sentence or whether she will walk free after just 4 months in a UK prison. They fear if left unsupervised, she will harm many more children. So can the Minister tell the House what the release terms are for Lecker, because those parents deserve answers?
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for raising this very important case, and I think that the whole House wants to send our thoughts and sympathies with all of the victims of these most heinous crimes. Child abuse is one of the most heinous crimes, and it is right that we have the correct support services available for child victims. The Sentencing Minister is meeting with colleagues in the Home Office today to discuss the needs of this case, and I will ensure that she gets a full update as requested on the specifics.
Nick Timothy, Shadow Justice Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister said passing the Hillsborough Law would be one of his first acts in office. But last month, the government arranged to bring the bill to the House for its remaining stages twice, only to pull it at the last moment on both occasions. The Prime Minister has made a promise to the Hillsborough Law campaigners that he cannot keep without breaking the assurances he gave to the intelligence agencies. It is another fine mess from Mr. Forensic. So can the Minister guarantee that the bill will complete its passage through both Houses of Parliament before the end of this session? Yes or no?
Mr. Speaker, as I said in the statement to the Honourable Gentleman, he must have a short memory because we were brought to this House to discuss this. The Hillsborough Law will be a landmark moment for this government. It will be a bill for the victims, written by the victims of those heinous experiences that they have been through. We will ensure that national security is, of course, upheld, and we will bring this bill forward when it has the full backing and when it is ready by everyone.
Roberts.
Number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prison education builds skills for life, including reading and numeracy, alongside work-focused training. We are expanding prison apprenticeships and prison industries, providing work-ready skills to support rehabilitation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer and the work that he's doing in prisons to improve literacy. But last week, the government confirmed to the Justice Committee that core prison education provision has been cut by a quarter nationally under retendered contracts. The Independent Monitoring Board recently raised concerns about the impact this will have in prisons, including Rochester Prison in my constituency, on prisoner rehabilitation. We know that stable work is one of the top factors in preventing male prisoners from reoffending, so education and training is therefore key to reducing our prison population in the long term. Can the Minister outline how he will ensure this will remain a priority?
Minister. Can I thank my right honourable friend for her question, and it was fantastic to visit her constituency just last week with her to visit a facility in the youth custody service, and I look forward to visiting Rochester Prison with her in future. She's right to raise this issue. There are real fiscal pressures when the two twin strategic objectives for this department are dealing with a prison capacity crisis inherited from the previous government, and pressures in our courts too. But that doesn't mean that we are going to overlook the importance of educational work in the prison system. We are looking at working with the third sector, the private sector, to ensure that we can provide adequate provision whilst also maintaining our two strategic aims of stabilising the prison system and solving the backlog.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next year, the government will spend more money on education in prisons, yet it will actually commission 25% less by way of quantity of service. Why is it doing such a poor job of commissioning education on behalf of the taxpayer?
Minister.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman who raised this question as well last week. We are raising the quality of the provision of the education, but he is also right to identify some issues with the contracts which the last Conservative government entered into, which we are having to look at and having to deal with. As I said to him last week, Mr. Speaker, it is important that we look at alternatives to those contracts as well. That includes, as I've just said, working with the third sector, looking at how we can get more private sector provision in, and as he said last week, working with governors individually to ensure they have more autonomy and power to bring in educational facilities from local colleges, universities, where possible, where safe, and I'm getting to work to do that this week.
MacDonald.
7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer questions 7, 12 and 17 together. This government inherited a criminal justice system on the brink of collapse, with record and rising backlogs now touching 80,000, and behind each and every one of those cases, a real victim. That's why we asked Sir Brian Leveson to undertake an independent review of criminal courts. It's why we're making investment in sitting days, investment in our workforce. It's why we're grasping the nettle in terms of modernisation. But it's why, too, we must have fundamental reform of our criminal courts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister was previously asked, but didn't clarify, whether the Ministry of Justice conducted modelling on how much reducing jury trials would actually reduce the backlog. The Bar Council and the Criminal Bar Association have repeatedly asserted that there is no evidence that limiting jury trials will meaningfully reduce court delays. So can the Minister now publish the evidence on which these reforms are based and explain why no pilot schemes were undertaken?
Minister.
Well, I thank him for his question, and as I've said repeatedly to the House, we will be publishing the modelling and evidence base in the usual way alongside bill introduction, but it's simply incorrect to say that there is no evidence that adjusting the threshold will reduce court delays, because of course we have the evidence base of the independent review, we have international comparators which show that decisive action will reduce the court delays.
Bills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was recently contacted by a constituent whose daughter was the victim of an abusive and violent relationship for many years. There were continual delays in this case coming to court, and then again at the sentencing stage. And this included a 5-month delay in sentencing due to mental health assessment being delayed, and then barrister annual leave and other staff availability issues. This led to repeated cancellations of sentencing dates, which meant the victim constantly reliving deeply traumatic events over and over again. So I'd like to ask the Minister what steps she is taking to address these preventable issues which are causing delays and misery for victims such as my constituent. Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the case he raises. It is a graphic illustration of the crisis that we are grappling with and the impact that it is having. Those delays cause trauma and make it impossible for victims to move on with their lives. What are we doing about it? The fact that over 1,000 trials were cancelled last year because of lack of barrister availability illustrates one of the problems highlighted by the Institute for Government. And that is why we are investing in our workforce, increased money for legal aid for solicitors and barristers, match funding for pupilages. But let's think about it. Of course, that will take time to rebuild the workforce, and it's why we must be pulling every lever, investment and structural reform. Only that will do.
Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, a victim of domestic abuse, has seen her case listed and relisted multiple times since 2023, with delays repeatedly granted due to medical claims by the defendant. Does the Minister accept that repeated adjournments risk denying justice to victims, and will she meet with me to discuss how cases like this can be progressed without further re-traumatisation?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to him for raising the case, and of course I would be happy to meet with him. Again, this is a graphic illustration of the ways in which the delays are re-traumatising victims through the process. It's why we must do everything within our power to bring down the delays. That's investment, that's modernisation and structural reform. And those who are against these plans are happy for his constituent and others to wait longer. Well, I'm not prepared to do that.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clearly, one of the areas that's causing the delays is the lack of defence barristers. Clearly, it's going to take time to train new barristers. What incentives, however, can the Minister offer to those qualifying in law to actually become defence barristers rather than seeking other avenues in the law?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful for that question because he's absolutely right. The workforce has been depleted by repeated numbers of legal aid cuts and people choosing more lucrative and more attractive areas of work. So what are we doing? We have said that we would invest an additional £34 million in legal aid for criminal advocates, and we're also providing match funding for criminal law pupilages to incentivise training, create those opportunities for people from all backgrounds to enter criminal law. But as he said, that will take time, and in the meantime victims can't wait, and it's why the reforms are necessary alongside the investment.
Shocker Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One major reason for court backlogs is the repeated outsourcing of private contracts to companies like Serco for prisoner transportation, which has caused a loss of a whole court day every single week. Now, given that there is a lack of penalty clauses for late prisoner transportation and Serco continues to be awarded procurement contracts, can the Minister commit that he will review this and the associated costs instead of removing our juries and our civil liberties?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful for the question that he raises, and of course this is one of the contributory factors, not the only one, in our courts. And again, we must look at all these things. We await part 2 of Sir Brian Levison's report, but in the meantime I can assure him that the Prisons Minister and I are looking at these contracts, performance managing them and pulling every lever. As the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned a moment ago, asking local authorities to open up bus lanes in order that we can increase the efficiency of prisoner transportation. But again, let us be absolutely clear. Addressing this issue alone will not begin to touch the sides of the problem. It's why we need investment and reform.
Anneliese.
Question number 8, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We recognise that parole hearings can be traumatic for victims, and victim liaison officers can support them throughout the process. We are launching a victim code consultation, which will also give victims the opportunity to provide input into what more can be done.
Anneliese.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of James Bulger's family are my constituents, and they are yet again facing the agony of another parole hearing of John Venables, an ordeal that continues to re-traumatise them more than 30 years after James's horrific murder. While parole board decisions are rightly independent, the system must command public confidence. So can I ask the Minister to give the parole board an overarching assessment of Venables' current risk and tell the House what reviews are being considered on the automatic two-year parole hearing cycle?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. She's a fine champion for her constituency and has raised this case both with me and other ministers on numerous occasions. This afternoon, Baroness Levitt, who is responsible for parole board hearings, is meeting with Ralph Bolger and his legal advisers to discuss this very issue. I'm sure she'll be able to offer some more substantive answers to her constituent's question. I would like to put, Mr. Speaker, on record my thanks to Ralph for his campaign, and I look forward and I'm very happy to meet with him and anyone else on this issue in due course.
Desmond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm aware there's an 82-year-old man who's been in prisons here for 38 years. He was convicted of murder, and the trial judge in 1989 said this was not a violent process and gave him a life sentence with a 15-year tariff. This expired over 22 years ago. He's repeatedly described as an exemplary prisoner. Because he's maintained his innocence throughout the last 38 years, he has not attended the prerequisite courses that would require an acceptance of guilt, so the parole board assesses his risk to the public if he's released as, quote, unmanageable, which seems ludicrous. I wonder whether the Secretary of State would agree to meet with me to discuss the parole board's repeated response to this situation and whether, in fact, there should be some sort of system for those who maintain their innocence for a great number of years.
Minister.
I'm very grateful. As the honourable member will no doubt be aware, I'm unable to talk about specifics of that case. If she writes to me, I will make sure that I get back to her with any details I'm able to.
Lord Lawrence.
Number 9, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of Justice, as I have stated, is investing over £550 million in victim support services, the biggest investment in this service to date. In December, we published our Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, setting out how we will achieve our mission to halve these terrible crimes, including domestic abuse, by rolling out domestic abuse protection orders, which are life-saving, and looking at how we can maximise specialist domestic abuse courts.
Lord Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her response there. A number of constituents have shared with me the terror of waiting in line to get to court and then waiting in the waiting room before court with their accused abuser or perpetrator. In some occasions, special arrangements have been put in place, but this has been very hit and miss. Will the Minister look at how these arrangements in supporting and protecting survivors get to court and not seeing their abuser as a standard, getting from the street to the courtroom safely?
No, I thank her for raising this really, really important issue, because ensuring that witnesses, that victims can give their best evidence in court is vital if we are to achieve prosecution of these awful crimes. We are introducing legislation to improve access to special measures for witnesses and victims, including permitting victims to be accompanied by a companion while giving evidence, to have separate entrances and exits, to provide pre-recorded cross-examination, and I'd be happy to write with her about more information as the legislation progresses.
We're our boss.
I recently brought together domestic abuse charities in Bath, such as Developing Health and Independence, Voices and the Milne Trust. They all provide services including how to navigate the complicated justice system. They all agree it's critical that they all work together, that there's joined up local services, but what can be done nationally to bring organisations and charities together rather than pitting them against each other in a field sort of limited resources?
No, the Honourable Lady is totally right to raise this point, and we talk a lot about something called multi-agency working, but it is difficult to put into practice. She will be aware that we published the Free from Fear and Violence strategy just before Christmas on how we can tackle violence against women and girls, with multi-agency working on a national level and practices and applications at the heart of that strategy. I am meeting with our Victims Sector Advisory Board later this afternoon, and I will make sure to raise this with them as well, so we bring them in, because they're the people on the ground delivering this work. We should learn from them directly.
Just.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the action that this government is taking to reduce the court backlogs, especially for cases involving violence against women and girls. Can the Minister please outline what consultation has taken place with victims' organisations and charities regarding the plans to restrict jury trials to ensure that these victims are kept at the heart of any reforms to the court system, and so that they can be satisfied that timely justice will be delivered?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for this very important question, because it is right that victims are put back at the heart of our criminal justice system. For far too long, their views, their voices have been ignored, but not by this government. The Courts Minister and I have met with many victims of some horrific crimes to hear about how court delays have impacted them. The Victims Commissioner is supportive of our reforms as outlined in Sir Brian Levison's report, and we look forward to Part 2 being published imminently so we can discuss how better we can support victims of these crimes going forward, to ensure that they do get their day in court and they do see justice being done.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Deputy Prime Minister join me in congratulating Cheshire Police, led by their exceptional Chief Constable Mark Roberts, on their very well executed Operation Crossbow, which I witnessed yesterday when over 40 perpetrators of domestic violence wanted by the police and the courts were arrested and detained by a police force committed to the safety of women. But would he agree that operations such as this in Cheshire will be put at risk by the government's desire to merge 43 forces into 12 and therefore increase the risk to victims of domestic violence?
Minister.
I commend the work of brilliant police forces up and down the country doing work to tackle domestic abuse. She will know that it was a Labour Party manifesto commitment to halve the levels of violence against women and girls, and exactly what she's talking about is happening in practice in Cheshire. Is this Labour government delivering for Cheshire and her constituency? She will know that the Home Office are consulting on proposals to ensure that we maximise police efficiency and boots on the ground to ensure that everyone is kept safe, that we have got safer streets, and the Home Office will update on those plans shortly.
Andrew Snowden.
Question number 10, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, assaults on our staff are unacceptable. We're enhancing security measures and easing crowding to curb violence and improve safety. We're investing around £15 million in protective equipment. I announced that shortly in taking office to help keep frontline staff working in prisons safe.
Andrew Snowden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the Secretary of State for that answer. We know that drugs on the prison estate is a perennial problem when it comes to the safety of both officers and other prisoners, something that governments of all colours have been trying to tackle for many times. This is particularly acute in the open prison estate due to the different resourcing nature and the different layout of those prisons. So would the Secretary of State consider a policy, now that we have potentially in some places over 40% of prisoners arriving in the open estate failing drug tests on arrival, a policy that says if you fail a drug test on arrival, you get sent straight back to the closed prison you came from?
Justice Secretary.
Well, he would know we did inherit a prison capacity crisis with violence up, with drugs up in our prisons, and of course because of that we've invested particularly in X-ray machines and extra prison officers to try and bear down on the problem. We're looking right across the estate at what more we could do to reduce drug use, and I was speaking to prison officers about this when I was visiting Franklin Prison last week, and I am looking closely at how the lowest categories of prisons deal with the issue of drugs.
That's Liffley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reason I use this powerful chamber to speak about crimes like rape is because I am so desperate to encourage women across the country watching us here to use their voice and speak out and report. And the reason I'm so determined to support the government in their changes is that when these women, these brave women come forward, I am desperate for them to have a system where they are supported every step of the way to get to the swift justice that they deserve. I am determined to do everything I can to play my part, and I ask the government, when we make these changes, when we make it easier for victims to get justice, how will we make sure that there is capacity in our prisons to take these criminals?
Just to say, it's not relevant to the question, but I'm sure the Justice Secretary would like to answer.
Well, she's absolutely right. We've got to have capacity in our prisons to deal with this crisis. And alongside the Courts Bill, that's why we introduced, and I'm glad it's become law, the Sentencing Bill, which is now a Sentencing Act, ensuring that we've got the capacity to deal with the crisis that we inherited, but also ensuring that that waiting list that's ticking upwards for victims of crime, particularly women, who find themselves often at the most vulnerable end of criminals, that we are bearing down on that by the next general election.
Excellent. Welcoming him to his new role, then Ambassador Jackie, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The use of drones to bring contraband into prisons has become a significant issue. Last year, there was an intra-year increase of 43% in the use of drones for illegal activity on the prison estate. As an MP of the prison in my constituency, HMP Littlehay, this surge in their use is alarming. Last month, the Justice Secretary announced that he has tasked British prisons with learning from Ukraine's drone expertise with a £6.5 million funding stream, but there was no tenders currently out to develop this capability. The only Ministry of Justice-specific competition has been November's £60,000 counter-drone challenge. So can the Justice Secretary confirm what the current counter-drone strategy is for HMPPS, given the current delays to installing physical UAS countermeasures? What specific projects are actually in flight to develop the counter-UAS capability across our prison estate, and by when will that capability be available?
Justice Secretary.
I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman raising this issue. It's a very serious issue, which is why I announced that partnership with our Ukrainian colleagues. He will recognise, I know, because of his own background, the substantial expertise that lies in Ukraine. And I announced as part of that package, perhaps he missed it, it was £6 million for that research innovation. He will also recognise that much of what we do to counter the drones that are flying across our prisons is classified, but I want to assure him that this is a priority for the government.
John Barron.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Decisions on remand and sentence left are made by judges independently of government. It would be wholly wrong for government to intervene in a judicial matter.
John Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm disappointed the Minister is not acknowledging that there is real harm and suffering going on. It's an obvious consequence of the escalation by ministers of the kinds of crimes for which people taking protest action are now being charged. So would he not agree that incarcerating people for long months and years without trial for offences which are in essence political has no in principle place in a democracy like ours?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do accept there are issues with remand, and that is caused by the huge backlog in our court system, which this government is trying to fix. So, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to her and her colleagues in the Green Party supporting our proposals when the Courts Minister brings them forward next month.
Steve Witherden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members across this House share my deep concern regarding the government's amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill already taken in committee, which would restrict the right to protest on the basis of cumulative disruption. Does the Minister not agree that, given the significance of this proposal and the serious implications it has for our fundamental right to protest, it is essential that this House has sufficient time to scrutinise, debate and vote on it? Can you give me that assurance?
Minister.
Well, that piece of legislation is going through the House as it should. Of course, there's always a balance to be struck between the important right to protest and also the protections for communities and groups to go about their lives without doing so with trepidation or any stifling of that, and I believe that amendment strikes that balance.
Right, we come to topicals. Martin Vickers.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Justice Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, since the last Justice Orals, this government has delivered the landmark Sentencing Act to deliver punishment that works to cut crime and make our streets safer. It will ensure we have enough prison cells for the most serious criminals, incentivise good behaviour in prison and deliver tough, credible community punishments to drive down reoffending. Our second annual statement on prison capacity shows the impact of our reform. For the first time in years, we no longer forecast a chronic shortage of prison places. This sits alongside the most ambitious prison building programme since the Victorians, aiming to build 14,000 new places by 2030, backed by £7 billion worth of investment.
Martin Vickers.
Could I return the Secretary of State to the issue of jury trials? I've received an email from a constituent who is a practising barrister who points out that the issues that have already been mentioned, poor prisoner transport, the cap on sitting days, the condition of many courtrooms. Could the Secretary of State actually focus on delivering improvements in those areas and abandon the proposals to actually limit jury trials?
Justice Secretary.
I've got to tell the honourable gentleman that he really should read Sir Brian Levison's report. We have to do all of it. Sir Brian will be publishing the second part of his report that deals with the issues that he talks about. But if we just did that, we would not see the backlog fall in his constituency. We have to invest in more sitting days, as we are, and as I will continue to do, but we also need reform, and that's why we're bringing forward those reforms on threshold.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a survivor of rape, the time it takes to get to court, if you even get that far, was one of the things that put me off reporting what happened to me. When people talk about changes to jury trials being justice denied, I understand their concerns, but what I don't think is always appreciated is that for victims of horrendous crimes, backlogs mean justice is already being denied, slowly and painfully. Could the Minister assure me that whilst hard decisions are made on the speed and rigour of justice, the Ministry will keep in mind those brave survivors who have come forward and are being let down by the system as it is?
Hear, hear. Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend, and I think I speak for all of this House when I say that he's spoken on a number of occasions about his horrific experience, and I know that takes a lot of courage. But I think what he says about the impacts that people have of the knowledge of delays in our courts and the way that that is putting off people from reporting or continuing with their cases. We know that witnesses and victims pull out of their own cases. And that is not only a torment for them, but it means that justice is not even being served and there are people walking away. That is why we must pull every lever. That is why we are bringing forward these reforms.
Shadow Minister Dr. Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a world where so many people walk on by or look the other way, I believe it's vital to the rule of law that our whole society gets behind people who are willing to stand up and be counted. Mr. Speaker, we're joined in the gallery today by one such person. Mark Hare here, a bus driver. Mark leapt to the aid of a passenger that was robbed, and the police said everything he did was entirely lawful. But his employer, Metroline, sacked him. More than 120,000 people have signed my petition giving their full support to Mark. Does the Justice Secretary agree with me that Mark is a hero who deserves our support?
Justice Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful. Mark is, of course, a hero and deserves our report, and I'm following this case very closely.
Dr. Milne.
Thank you. I welcome those remarks. I'm sure the public will want to see us work cross-party on these issues. This isn't an isolated case. I've heard from employers themselves, from shop workers, from other bus drivers, that they want to do the right thing, but the law inhibits them from doing so. The Conservatives will be bringing forward proposals to introduce Good Samaritan protections in civil law for both employers and employees. Will you work with us to get that onto the statute books?
Justice Secretary.
These are issues that have a bearing on the Department for Business and Trade, so necessarily we have to work across government, but in a bipartisan manner. Of course, I'm happy to work with the Honourable Gentleman and Ministers to work with the Honourable Gentleman on this issue.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been 10 years since the Jogi ruling on joint enterprise, and I'd like to pay tribute to the joint enterprise not guilty by association campaigners who are in the gallery today for their amazing work they've done in this area. But new CBS data identifies continued racial disproportionality with more black defendants swept into group convictions. So can the Justice Secretary confirm that meaningful law reform remains a priority, and can he assure that campaigners that this is not going to be a broken promise?
Justice Secretary.
Well, can I first pay tribute to the work of my honourable friend for continuing to champion this issue, and can I also pay tribute to the work of Jennifer. I met with the chair of the RCC, who I know have referred, I think, 3 cases to appeal to look closely at the issue, and of course I am taking an interest in this issue and look forward to meeting campaigners in the coming months to discuss what more we might be able to do.
Good time. Just Brownfellow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's clear as more evidence comes to light that Peter Mandelson abused his position while in government, and the Liberal Democrats are calling for a public inquiry. The Hillsborough law cannot come soon enough to ensure that public inquiries hear all of the relevant evidence. So when it does finally come back to the House, will the government seriously consider my amendment that would ensure that duty of candour applies to all those leaving public office, including those that retire, resign or are removed?
I'm grateful to the lady for raising this issue. I'm quite confident that it does now, but I will look closely again at her amendment.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rotten culture of secrecy and cover-up at the heart of the SNP government is laid bare by the Glasgow Queen Elizabeth Hospital scandal. Grieving families were lied to and dismissed, whistleblowers bullied and threatened. Can I ask the Minister if the Public Office Accountability Bill will protect Scottish families from government dishonesty and corruption?
I thank my honourable friend for raising this very important issue on the floor of the House. All of my thoughts are with the victims and survivors of this horrific situation in Scotland at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. The Bill's duty of candour will create a powerful new obligation on all public bodies and officials to help investigations and inquiries find that needed truth, placing them under a legal obligation to provide information with evidence of candour, and this duty will apply UK-wide, including in Scotland.
Mr. Speaker, one of my constituents is the director of a small property company which commenced the eviction process of a tenant nearly a year ago who hadn't been paying their rent. But due to court errors, enforcement has not yet taken place, and these delays have cost my constituent over £6,000. During a housing crisis, we should be freeing up housing for reliable tenants. So I ask the Minister, does she recognise that lengthy court delays are stifling our rental market?
Minister.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about the case that she raises. County Court rules require that possession claims be listed for hearing within 8 weeks of receipt. And in the main, we are hitting that target. With the Renters' Rights Act coming into force, readiness for that will be important, as will the modernising introduction of end-to-end digital possession claim service, which will improve the situation for constituents like hers.
Go around.
Mr. Speaker, for too long, victims in Altrincham and Sale West and across the country have been treated as secondary thoughts in the criminal justice system, being left in limbo, not knowing their rights and feeling voiceless when decisions are made on bail and sentencing. What reassurances can the Minister give that victims will be at the heart of the justice system under the government's reforms?
No, I thank my honourable friend for that vitally important question about putting victims back at the heart of our criminal justice system. That is exactly what this government is doing, whether that is through providing free court transcripts for criminal cases, through introducing new restriction zones in the Sentencing Act, by consulting on a brand new victims code to ensure that victims' rights are enshrined, to ensure that they have the ability to request information on parole and on offender management. And I'd be happy to write to him with more information about how this government is delivering for victims.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In order to discourage ex-offenders from reoffending, it's absolutely crucial that on leaving prison, they've got a stable home, an opportunity for a job and a stable network around them to stop them reoffending. But with the advent of early release, there is a risk that those leaving prison are not given that support before they leave the prison gates. So what action is the Minister going to take to make sure that those leaving prison after completing their sentences actually don't reoffend?
Minister. He's absolutely right to raise this issue about reoffending. It's why this government is making record investment in our probation service, £700 million, a 45% increase, trying to fix the probation service that the last Conservative government completely broke. That is the only and best way in which we're going to deal with the prison capacity crisis and clamp down on reoffending.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prison officers every day face appalling levels of violence at work, but their hands are tied because of the Tory ban on any kind of industrial action. They cannot resist this. Does the Minister agree that prison officers should have the legal right to withdraw their labour and to take industrial action to protect themselves and others whilst at work in what is an extremely dangerous workplace?
Justice Secretary.
Well, I recognise the seriousness of the issue that Honourable Friend raises, and I met with prison officer unions just 2 weeks ago to discuss these very same issues. My own judgment is that with the prison capacity crisis as what it is, with the pay increases that we've been able to make to prison officers over this last time, this would not be the right time to explore changes in the practices that he underlined.
Bedford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been reported that lawyers, some of whom now sit in this House and the other place, have relied on the ECHR to support the prosecution of patriotic Brits who have fought for their country. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that this is yet another example of activist lawyers and unaccountable judges in Strasbourg shamefully pursuing veterans doing their duty? And will he, like us on these benches, commit to withdrawing from the ECHR?
Mr. Speaker, utter nonsense and completely misunderstanding how our legal system works. We on this side of the House understand that lawyers have to represent all sorts of people all the time, and we will stand by that. I would just gently say to the honourable gentleman that the Shadow Attorney General, while serving on the Tory front bench, is currently representing Roman Abramovich, a sanctioned Russian oligarch. There's no word from the other side on that issue at all.
Very much indeed, Mr Speaker. Well, I very much welcome the fact that Llanelli, along with the rest of Wales, will be in the pilot expansion of the Victims' Right to Review scheme. But, as the Minister will know, it's often very difficult for children or adults who have suffered neglect and abuse as children to report such incidents. So would the Minister agree to meet with me to look again at extending the 6-month time limit for summary offences, which leaves survivors with no redress and leaves abuse and neglect go unpunished?
I welcome this from my right honourable friend. She's right to highlight the expansion of the victims' right to review through all of Wales so that Welsh victims have this right to review their cases. I would be delighted to meet with her to discuss what more we can do for Welsh victims across the criminal justice system.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I have a case where a transparency campaigner who has availed of legal aid to take a case against government back in 17 years ago and has appealed and reviewed attempts by me to have the total cost of legal aid to be made publicly and ironically transparent. That is still ongoing 6.5 years later. Will the Deputy Prime Minister have discussions with the Justice Minister in Northern Ireland to stop this attempt to prevent transparency?
Well, he will know that justice is a devolved matter. I'm content for him to write to me and I can look into the specific case, but of course it is a devolved matter.
Mr Speaker, violence against prison staff is at intolerable levels, with over double the number of assaults now than a decade ago, all at the same time that prison officers are expected to work until they're 68 years of age. Does the Minister agree with me that this is unfair, unrealistic, and if so, what are the government going to do about it?
My honourable friend is right. We're expecting a lot of our prison officers, and I was staggered at the state that we inherited from the party opposite. I met with unions just a couple of weeks ago to discuss these issues. We're in a good dialogue with them about pay, work and conditions, and of course they did raise the issue of their retirement age.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Secretary of State instruct his officials putting construction plans together for a new mega prison adjacent to HMP Grendon to actually listen to local voices rather than insisting from a distance on traffic management plans that will put thousands of HGVs down totally inappropriate rural roads?
He's absolutely right. Of course, whenever we're building new prisons, we have to think about the local area and make sure that we listen to local people's views. I would gently say that under the Conservative government, they had a promise of 20,000 new prison places, and they managed just 2% of them. I think we're starting to see why.
Rachel Maskell.
Mr Speaker, the government were making great strides on IPP sentences, yet my constituent, held for nearly 2 decades, had a minor infringement, he missed an appointment and then ended up back inside. That cannot be right. We need to ensure people get proper support outside. So will the government review what happens post-release to IPP prisoners?
I was looking at these issues just yesterday with one of the leading campaigners on IPP. We are making progress with the action plan, but I'm happy to arrange for a meeting with her and the Prisons Minister to discuss these issues in a bit more detail.
Mr Speaker, given that the MOJ is responsible for granting exhumation licences, does the Secretary of State agree that historical significant pauper burial sites such as Horton Cemetery in my constituency require stronger safeguards? And will he meet with me to discuss how licensing decisions can better protect them?
I would be honoured to meet with the Honourable Lady to discuss the case she mentions.
Ewan Steinbank.
Mr Speaker, the Scottish Parliament this week are considering a bill by the fantastic Scottish Labour MSP Monica Lennon which would enable the prosecution of climate criminals who cause widespread, long-term or irreversible damage to our environment. What consideration have ministers made of consulting on making ecocide a criminal offence across the United Kingdom?
Minister.
I thank him for raising this issue. I have had positive conversations with colleagues across government, including in DEFRA, as to how we can progress with this, and I'd be delighted to meet with him to discuss what more work we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the sale of government land around HMP Wheelston, but may I ask the Minister whether neighbouring residents were given advance notice of the auction details so they may express an interest?
Minister.
If he writes to me, I'll get back to him on those details, Mr. Speaker.
State Committee under Slaughter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State will shortly make a statement on violence in separation centres. Can I apologise? I won't be here for that, as the Select Committee has a long-planned court visit. I will, of course, read Jonathan Hall Casey's report carefully, but will he also look at violence on the youth estate and the 44% year-on-year increase in assaults on staff by children? What is the government doing about that?
The Honourable Friend is absolutely right to centre the youth justice system, and we will be bringing forward an action plan in this area very, very shortly.
Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation found that weaknesses in risk assessment, information sharing and planning in domestic abuse cases are leaving victims at greater risk of harm and without consistent safeguarding across Kent, Surrey and Sussex. Can the Secretary of State set out what steps his department are going to take to ensure the changes identified in the report are implemented and the victims of domestic abuse receive effective support through the criminal justice system?
Minister.
I'm not Bill Esterson. I thank the honourable member for her question. I will look at that report and make sure personally that we look at what the recommendations are and how we can be implemented. I would say this government has put record investment into our probation services. We're also harnessing technology to ensure that probation officers can do what they are trained and want to do, which is work with offenders to rehabilitate rather than be bogged down in paperwork. But I will look at that specific case and come back to her.
Bill Esterson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend from Knowsley asked about the 2-year parole cycle when she raised the appalling case of James Bolger. James's dad, Ralph, is now a constituent of mine, which is why I'm following up. Will he consider changing the rules on the 2-year system, given the re-traumatisation that happens every time the family have to relive what happened to James every 2 years?
Justice Secretary.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for raising this issue on behalf of Ralph Bolger, and I know that he's meeting with the Minister today, but can I indicate to him that I'm very happy to meet to discuss these issues in the coming weeks, notwithstanding my important role within this context.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In its manifesto at the last election, the now government promised to set up specialist rape courts in every Crown Court location. Can the Minister update the House on how many have been set up to date?
I thank the honourable gentleman for highlighting the brilliant Labour Party manifesto, which we are delivering in government. He is right to highlight the need for specialist rape courts. It's something that we are working with the Courts Minister on, looking to see how we can push this forward to ensure that rape victims who have been languishing, waiting for justice, aren't waiting too long, and it's why we are implementing Sir Brian Levison's reviews to ensure that swifter justice for victims is introduced.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The new judicial finding of domestic abuse in the Sentencing Act will help us better identify domestic abusers in the criminal justice system. Can the Minister explain when this element of the bill or the Act will be commenced, and what additional training will be given to judges and magistrates to make sure that they can implement it effectively?
Well, who wants it? Which Minister?
Well, we will obviously update the House when it's ready for implementation, but he's right to highlight the importance of training when it comes to domestic abuse cases. Judicial training is an independent function run by the Judicial College, but domestic abuse training, and particularly that trauma-informed approach to evidence, is a mandatory part of that training, as it must be.
Right, that completes questions. Let the front benches change over.